So I'm going to roll through a new segment of ours, call it Supplier Central. This is the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, where we dive into different things that affect procurement. Let's go.
We want to rebuild.
Rebuild it.
It'll take me a month to rebuild it.
Rebuild.
That's how you rebuild, comrade.
All right. So I'm Tom Finn. I have 15 years client-side procurement, finance, supply chain management experience. Here on Rebuild today, we are going to go into a supplier that, if you're talking about trying to negotiate with somebody, this is someone that, unless you're spending billions, you have to kind of get what you can. But I'm going to start with one thing. There's actually something we were going to talk about on our last episode, but didn't get to it. Their earnings were 2 weeks ago. So this is a company that has, well, first off, figure the annual average profit margin for the largest 25 pharmaceutical companies is about, call it 15 to 20%. And average profit for all the non-drug companies of the largest 500 companies is 4 to 9%. This company, since 2018, right? So call it 6 years. For the past 6 years, has been greater than 30% profit margins and might exceed 40 for again this year. Now, before I tell you who it is, I'm going to give you some of the background. So in 1931, the founder, they started just thinking, well, I guess they were born, you got to be born first, but born in Ningbo, China, and ended up being a great academic. He studied mechanical engineering at MIT, got his PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. So he was learning in the U.S. institutions. And from there, worked in some different companies and started working very intensely at Texas Instruments in the, I think, call it the 70s. And he left in 1983 when he got passed over for the CEO position. And then shortly after he left, could be in tandem, who knows, but the Taiwanese government, they recruited him to develop Taiwan's semiconductor industry. So Texas Instruments, TI, they were a huge, especially in the 80s, 70s, these guys were one of its when it comes to electronics. And he took that, and Taiwan was figuring out where it wanted to invest its money. And with that, the TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, was born in 1987 under Morris Chang. So this guy was, he really did a lot. He essentially, he took what he knew from TI, took his leadership abilities, and he built this thing into what is now a $900 billion market cap company that's in the manufacturing space. So what do they do? So if you look at just around your desk right now, look at your phone that you might be listening to this on, look at everything. It all has chips. The car you're driving is full of chips. That's what we usually say, full of chips. And there's only so many companies that do this. So TSMC, they have a few competitors, only one that's real in Samsung. So Samsung does a lot of things. But they make some of the chips that are more specialized. But still, TSMC is the go-to when it comes to the top end of these advanced process nodes. So to walk through kind of what chips are, because I think this is something that we all hear about. Again, it's in everything, right? That's kind of what you hear, beginning and end. But there's basic ones. There's stuff that might be in like your Nest camera. That might be one of the better ones. But there's others that just used every day. Could be using your thermostat. Lots of different things, and lots simpler. The automotive, many chips in older cars for like basic functions. Just even think about things like your your windshield wipers, right? Your parking sensors. All that is run through essentially little mini computers. And what these ones for that TSMC makes, they're more towards the AI. So, and things like the smartphone chips, the chips like Snapdragon, a lot of like the 5G networking, your data centers. So really like the run up, why is TSMC valued at $900 million? Sure, it's multiple things, but really it's two. The one is AI, which is NVIDIA primarily. They've been the one that captured a lot of AI. So if you're working in the AI space, a lot of the data centers, what companies want now are these NVIDIA, just these NVIDIA computing processors and things of that nature to run essentially which run the cloud and run this, was turning into an AI cloud. And with that, there's there's the AI aspect of it, and then there's just their precision abilities. These guys have pushed further and further beyond themselves and everyone else, where now, if you just think of what's in your windshield wiper, call those anywhere from like 65 to 90 nanometers, 130 for some older ones. Then some of like the better ones, 22, and just think of like from a size standpoint, what TSMC is able to manufacture down to now is 3 nanometers, which is just ridiculously small. So I really probably should come up with a comparison, but that is just absurdly small. And essentially no one, with the exception of maybe Samsung, has been able to capture. So Samsung, they're actually the only ones that can make down to that 5 and 3 nanometers. But still TSMC is seen as more of the cutting edge aspect of it. And you might hear in the US, Intel has always been like the company when it comes to it. They are currently not even in the running. They're essentially in the 10 and 7 still. Let's call it like twice as big, right? Can't get they still need to get smaller, and they've decided to invest a lot of money into it. But I think at the same time, having listened to the TSMC earnings call, sounds like they could possibly be up for sale too, but to be determined. But then what does that do for your supply chain? TSMC, they own 50% essentially of the market share. So there's a few factors that come into play when looking at a supplier that has that much dominance, and not just dominance in the terms of manufacturing ability, but also the cutting edge aspect. If you need some of that new stuff, and what's happened, reason for the market cap is because they're able to charge such a premium. And they say that they're not even taking as much as they possibly could. They're still working to be a partner, and I'm sure if a company is being run properly for the long term, you may capture a lot, but you don't want to capture everything and totally rake your customer over the coals. So they're cognizant of having a partnership or symbiotic, as much as it could be, relationship with their customers, or so they say. So it's difficult to negotiate with one of these. I mean, really, it's a pay up kind of situation. If you need them, you're going to have to pay, and that's something. If you're in the business of needing to discuss TSMC as a supplier, positioning that as how can you become a partner is really your bargaining chip. There's also, from a standpoint of geopolitical risks, call it maybe a little looking forward into TSMC and where this is going to go. They, as a company, they're kind of at the center of very big geopolitical risks, and they're expanding outwards. They're investing in foundries, or call it just manufacturing sites that are within the US as well, but not necessarily that 3 nanometer level. But they are exposed to China. Still considers themselves considers Taiwan, where TSMC is located, and the majority of the manufacturing is located, as part of China. And it's been always this balancing act between the United States not saying that they're separate, but acknowledging don't start wars over Taiwan, but there's been a lot more tension of late. The technological leadership, they're going to continue to push, which is a really cool thing about TSMC. Their CEO, he's not necessarily new, but CC Wei, he has his PhDs. Give a quick background. He has a PhD from in electrical engineering from Yale, and then he also had worked at TI. I believe it was a little bit after Morris Chang had left. He continued on, but what he was saying was they are going to continue to push for technological development, and right now they're looking to get down to 2 nanometer by end of 2025, which pushes performance boundaries even further. And really what will lead to continued leverage is this space where AI and quantum computing, they're still paying that premium. TSMC, they give a bit of a how much they sell by segment, so the different types of chips, and just assume that margin, a lot of it's going to be coming from these advanced technological chips themselves. So again, it's going to be a bit of a continue to pay until the market commoditizes in a way. And with the massive investment big investment from Intel, Samsung, just to capture that as a client, if you're a client, then this is something that will continue to be, a focus and a hope. But until then, for this foreseeable future, it'll be dealing with these constraints. And I guess the other piece is, to the extent that they expand more, the ability to have that will not necessarily leave them at the same gross margins, potentially, or profit margins, but will allow them to sell more chips and continue to be that company. So again, just the differentiators between where TSMC is and some of their competitors. So the technological leadership, couldn't speak more about that. I mean, these guys are just way ahead of the game, and their leadership, that's where they want to keep them. TSMC, they're what you would call a pure play foundry. So they're focused on just manufacturing chips. Samsung, the brand, because they're everywhere. They do other things, as does Intel. And what they do, they make chips for other people, but they'll do it for themselves as well. Whereas TSMC, they're kind of in the middle, right? They're like, we don't care. We serve everybody. They'll make it for Apple. They'll make it for Meta, Facebook. They'll make it for whomever, Nvidia, Microsoft. They're indifferent, and they don't make the end products for the end customer. They just make the chips as a foundry. Where they can continue to help themselves and help their clients is global diversification. So going outside of Taiwan, the US, I believe they're building in Japan as well, if they have not already built some. This is some of the things that both Samsung and Intel have done. Cost structure is different. So if you're manufacturing in the US, it's more than it is in Taiwan, but there could be efficiencies gained just by how they manufacture and things they do. So I'd say those are the main pieces. And really what it comes down to, if you're in this space, is leverage, right? If you're purchasing from companies like this, TSMC, I mean, they do a lot of what you want as a supplier, right? They're pushing to be at the cutting edge. They're ahead of everybody. They're expanding manufacturing footprints to diversify geopolitically, but then also just expand out so they can manufacture more. Pricing is not one of the things that's going to be easily negotiable with TSMC. They're like a completely sold out company. So it's a space where you have to do the ROI on your end. And there's a lot of investment going into AI right now. And ROI is much more forward looking. So you're therefore paying a premium on that product. And TSMC and NVIDIA are reaping a lot of those benefits. But it is something where you need to understand the long-term vision of your company if you're having to negotiate with someone like TSMC that is cutting edge, that is sold out, that in a way is kind of doing you a favor or themselves a small favor in diversifying for the future, but really doing you a favor in by even adding you to their manufacturing schedule. So just wanted to dive through this. Again, these guys are so knocking it out of the park. They deserve to continue to be highlighted and better understood as a company. And as AI, and as you look back, like the big data, all of those type things, the way that AI works, it needs chips like these that can run and see how this all plays out. And that's the show. Thanks for joining us on the Supplier Central segment of Rebuild Procurement Podcast. Tune in weekly for new procurement-related content. Subscribe wherever you get your pods.
We want to rebuild.
Rebuild it.
It'll take me a month to rebuild it.
Rebuild.
That's how you rebuild, comrade. Show me, and you won't hear the word rebuild.
Rebuild.